Hi, I'm Dawn with K-Square Technologies. Welcome to our monthly webinar training series. Today's session is time-saving Microsoft Office keyboard shortcuts. Now, for most software users, the keyboard is the fastest and easiest way to access those frequently used features in your favorite programs. So whatever you want to do, chances are the keyboard shortcuts will save you time. And it's often a lot faster than having to move or navigate to the mouse to perform actions. In this session, we'll explore essential shortcuts for key Microsoft Office programs, including Excel, Outlook, Word, and PowerPoint. So get ready to take some notes on the highlights and new shortcuts that will save you time, because our time together is going to be pretty fast-paced, and I'll share more than 100 keyboard shortcuts in this session. Also keep in mind that all of our monthly webinar training series are also recorded and are available on the K-Square Technologies YouTube channel. So that is another way to review the shortcuts that you find are most helpful to you. So let's start by first reviewing the essential keyboard shortcuts you should already know for each Microsoft Office program. And you're probably already using many of these, but I want to make sure that we get this foundation laid out first before we start digging into the particular applications. So we have our essential file management shortcuts, and these are anything from Control-N for new to Control-O for open. It's likely, and if you aren't already using it, Control-S for save. That's something I use frequently throughout every day. Control-P to print. And so these are some of the shortcuts that, although you may not have them all memorized, some of them you probably do if you're using them on a regular basis, but they can certainly save you time. F12 for save as is also a really helpful one to know about. Now, editing shortcuts, and keeping in mind these apply not only in our Microsoft Office applications, but in many other Microsoft applications, as well as other Windows programs. So although I don't recommend or don't suggest that you need to memorize all of these, you might have some cheat sheets for these, but some of the ones that you should know or start to commit to memory: cut, copy, paste, and undo. So Control-X, Control-C, Control-V, Control-Z. These are all actions that we can even use in our browser and other programs that we use every day. So definitely make sure that these are ones that you have in your library of keyboard shortcuts. Let's dig into those specific applications as well. And we'll start first with Outlook. So as I mentioned, I'm going to run through these pretty quickly and just make note of those that are new for you or that you find to be pretty helpful for you. So how about navigating in Outlook? Well, Control-2 is a way to quickly get to your calendar. Control-3 for contacts. Control-4, your task. Control-5 is your folder list on the left-hand side. Excuse me, Control-5 is notes. Control-6 is your folder list on the left-hand side. And we can Control-1 to get back to email. Another handy shortcut is to display your to-do bar. Now you can find this under View and the to-do bar, but you don't have to even move to the ribbon for that. And that's the advantage here. So Alt and the F2 function key. So the to-do bar, which is something you may be familiar with, is really handy to create more of kind of a portal with Outlook where you can see your calendar and you can see upcoming appointments. And you can further customize it under View and To-Do bar and perhaps you want to display your upcoming task as well. So that was Alt and the F2 function key as a toggle to turn that on and off. So once you've established your preferences for it, it's something that you can easily access whenever you want to. Now our search, that's another option here. There's multiple ways to get to this. So for instance, if I want to, I can press Control E. Now, Alt Q also works. That is, we often have multiple ways of getting to the same place. So to get search, Control E or the F3 function key. Now this also works in Microsoft Teams and Microsoft OneNote. So that can be really helpful for you. And let's say now that I'm up here in my search, I want to look for anything that references chocolate. And we have a lot of responses here, but then now that we're in the search, we could also narrow it to perhaps has attachments or other references as well. Now, some other keyboard shortcuts that will be helpful for you in Outlook. Control N is the way to create a new item in your current view. In this case, then, if this was since I'm in my email, then my inbox, and that would give me a new email message. But if maybe we're in our calendar, Control Shift M, think of that as mail or message, Control Shift M. That means you don't have to leave your calendar. You can simply then open up another window where you can create that message. And from any location, if you want to create a new appointment, for instance, Control Shift A. So think appointment. Control Shift Q is for a meeting request. So most of these are mnemonic in that the letter makes sense, but because of so many different assignments, you might have some of these that you may want to jot down or to memorize as well. Control Shift C for contact, and Control Shift K if I want to create a task. And so all of these are different ways for you to quickly move to that action that you want in Outlook without necessarily having to change your view. You might find that those are really helpful time savers for you. Now, let's say, for instance, I want to reply to a message. And so I'll come back here to my inbox. And by the way, remember, if I wanted to, I could minimize those or simply switch to that particular window. And I have this message here from Adele that is highlighted. So to reply to that, I could open that up, but I can also press Control R for reply. And so now I have that message quickly. And now what do I want to do with it? Well, and by the way, you could do Control Shift R to reply to all, Control Shift R or Alt L. So that would be another option if I wanted to reply to everyone. And let's just say that that's what I want to do. Then simply Control Shift R or Alt L. And now I'm replying to all of the people that were in that message. And let's just say forward. So I have my response. I want to send it on its way. Yes, I could go to my mouse and send it, but another way to do this, to save, close, and send, Alt S or Control Enter, Alt S or Control Enter. And now I've sent it on its way. So these are the types of things. Think about keyboard shortcuts work best when you have these repetitive actions things that you may be doing frequently throughout the day. Which ones would help save you time and give you that opportunity so that you aren't always having to switch from the keyboard to go to the mouse, for instance, to perform an action. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and move to our calendar. That is Control-2. And now we're in our calendar. But we might want to be able to view this information in different ways. And you can see that this is available in the Home tab as well as under our View tab. But there are keyboard shortcuts as well. Control-Alt-1. Control-Alt-1, that gives us our day view. For our work week, that is Control-Alt-2. So you can see that they're incrementally building on that. This is our work week. If we want to see our week view, you probably guessed it, Control-Alt-3. And that is inclusive then of Sunday and Saturday. Now our month view, Control-Alt-4. And if we want to go to a specific date, there's multiple things that we can do. And so for instance, Control-G is go to. And if I then want to go to a specific date, then, and notice here, how do I want to show it? Well, I'll show it in my monthly calendar, but I could always change this back to, let's say, my week view. So I have that particular opportunity here. Let's try that again. Control-G, go to, and I'm on that particular day, or I could switch that view. Now, let's say I want to go to the next month. That is Alt page down or Alt page up. So that's an interesting way to move depending upon the views, but this will be supported with multiple views. So that is another way as well. So let's look at that go to again. I want to move, let's say, to another date here. And when I bring up that list, if I want to move to this next option, maybe I want to see this in my day view or a different view. When you're in dialog boxes, hit the tab key as a way to move back and forth. And you can kind of see that different buttons are selected or drop downs are selected. And this can be helpful to just be able to navigate. Here again, there's always going to be a keyboard way of doing something. And now I'll hit my down arrow key to see my list. And let's go ahead, I'll shift tab there. And it's Alt and the down arrow key, not just the arrow key, Alt and the down arrow key. And so if I did want to see this in my month calendar, for instance, or my week calendar, I could simply now select this using my arrow keys and hit enter, and then enter for OK. So those are some different ways to really save time in Outlook by utilizing these keyboard shortcuts. Now let me know in chat, should you have any questions or if you want me to repeat a particular action or shortcut, but definitely make sure that you're jotting down which of these will help you save time as you're working with these various Office applications. So let's switch gears here. Now, this is another keyboard shortcut I want to just share with you. I'm holding down the Alt key and I'm hitting Tab. And I could, and sometimes it's faster if I move to the mouse because this is where I want to go. But by just hitting the Tab, I could also move to the other window that I want to. And then when I let go of my Alt key, I'm there. So that becomes another way for us to really be able to leverage or take advantage of how we will work with these various programs and how we can quickly navigate, because I'm guessing you have multiple programs open at the same time. And so that becomes another way for us to work. Now in Excel here, we'll look at some different ways, first of all, to navigate any worksheet, especially if it's a really lengthy one. To get to the last cell in that worksheet, simply press Control and the End key, as in the end. So Control End. Now, also keep in mind, if you do this and you go way beyond where the data is, you may need to delete some rows and columns because there may have been previous formatting or data that was in that location. So that's what it's remembering for the end of that worksheet. Control Home takes us back to the beginning of the worksheet. Now, these navigation shortcuts also work in Microsoft Word, and they often work in other applications. So that would also apply, let's say, in a PowerPoint presentation. Now, if I want to move to the next sheet in this workbook, that is Control Page Down or Control Page Up to move back. So that becomes an easy way as well. Now, if I want to simply navigate around the worksheet, that's where we use Control combined with different arrow keys, like Control and the down arrow key takes me to the bottom of this column. It will stop if there happen to be any blank cells. Now, just so you can see that that's where I'm at, I've just used my arrow keys to navigate a little bit. Control Right, that will take me to the far right. Control Up, Control F, left. So Control Left will take me to the beginning of the row. Now the Home key will also take you to the beginning of the current row. That's another way to work. But what if we have, especially with large worksheets, what if we want to go to a specific location? That's our go-to. And we saw this before in Outlook too. Control G for go-to. Control G or the F5 function key, either one. So with this, then what we will see is any list of previous locations we've moved to, as well as range names. Now there happens to be a range name for the table that we're in. But we could pick those or we could type that. So that means that, for instance, if I just wanted to go to a specific cell, I could type in H100 and hit enter. I also can use my name box, which is in the upper left-hand corner above column A, for this similar action to be able to navigate. But let's look at that again. Control G or F5. This time, what I want to do is go to even more specific in where my navigation is, particular kinds of content. Now I want to go to pick the special button here. And yes, I could use my mouse to do that. But when you're in a dialog box, if you hold Alt and the S key for special, in this case, whatever is underlined, that's what we're looking for. So Alt and the S. Now I have the Go To Special dialog box. And this is then a way for me to specify what I want to highlight, where I want to go, what will be helpful. So in this case, I'm going to hit Escape to cancel because I want to move to a different worksheet for this. And as we saw before, Control Page Down, and now Control G for Go To, Alt S for Special, and I'd like to then in this case, that's okay. In this case, what I want you to see here is that for this, then I want to go to a particular place. Now, I don't have formulas. That's what I really wanted to show you, but you can see here that we could highlight conditional formatting. We could highlight where we have blanks. We could highlight other actions as well. So let's try those one more time. There we go. And you know what? Another keyboard shortcut that we have is for our sum function. So let's try that. Alt equals. And you can see here then that with that, I have, I can confirm that that's my formula that I want, and I will hit enter. Now, in this case, I'll say that probably the mouse is going to be the fastest way to be able to do this fill, but we also have the fill option, and that is in our ribbon. So first of all, if I want to get to my ribbon, I'm going to go press, I can press my Alt key. That is, no, there's always going to be keyboard ways. This is not only to save time, but it's also for accessibility. That is to make sure that we can access these various tools, regardless of what will be the best or easiest way for us. So I hit the Alt key. Now you'll notice that there will be letters or numbers assigned to the key areas. That is our menus, as well as our quick access toolbar options. So for this, I want to be in the Home tab. I'll hit the H for Home. And now notice that each of these actions has then a combination or a letter, a number, or some other combination. And I want to go to fill, which is FI. Now you can see that if I wanted to do this, then if I want to fill down, I'll type a letter D for down. And oh, that was a copy. So I'll do Control Z for my undo. And that is, so that's another keyboard shortcut, is that you can do Control D for duplicate. But let's go ahead here. I don't want to belabor that too much, but what I wanted you to see here is that I have, if I have formulas, Control G, I'll go into special, and here I can do Alt F for formulas and then hit enter. Think about those worksheets you have that might have hundreds or thousands of rows. Now, if you have formulas in that, and we could highlight this. Now, I might even format this and make it a different color so it stands out. When you're dealing with data that other people may have touched, it's good to confirm or to audit that they actually have not typed in something in the wrong place. That is, that they actually have a formula where it should be. And so imagine that you could select, use that go to special and select this, and then have this formatted. So that's where go to special can be really helpful for us. Let's look at some other shortcuts, and specifically for selection. So Control A is a way to select the current range. Now, if I want the whole worksheet maybe to change formatting, I press Control A a second time. So that is an easy way for me to do that. Now, if I want to select cells a little bit differently, or I want to select a range, there's another approach for that too. And in this case, I'll move to my next sheet, which is sales. And what if I only want a particular range for formatting or maybe to copy? Then that's where we can hold down the Shift key. So instead of dragging your mouse and have that runaway mouse, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and then I'll use my arrow keys. I could use my page down as well. And so this is a way for me to be able to have more control over what I'm selecting. The whole time I'm holding down my Shift key. So that gives me the value that, or makes this so much easier. Now this also works in Microsoft Word as well. And so with this, then whatever I want to do with this, it could be a formatting action. It could be that I want to cut or copy. Let's say I wanted to make this bold. Well, keyboard shortcut for bold in lots of Windows applications, Control B. So now this is bold, or Control I for italics. So those are all possibilities there as well. Now, another action that will work for us if we want to select, in this case, I just hit my left arrow so that I cleared that selection. If you want more control, or if you don't want it to, if it's a very large range, it might be helpful. This is where you can use the F8 function key. the F8 function key. Now let me just change my window for a moment here. And there is a keyboard way for us to change this window, but just for the sake of time here, what I want you to look for here in the status bar here is that when I hit the F8 function key, it says extend selection. Now that is partially because if I right click here, I've enabled that I want that particular mode to be turned on, the selection mode. So that's another key. This check mark indicates what is displayed. So I might want to see other things here too while I'm at it. But I've got my extend selection. So that's like pinning the selection. Now I don't have to hold down anything. I'm not holding down shift or anything. I'm just using my arrow keys. I can hit page down, arrow to the right. There's lots of different options here. And then it's what's the next action? It could be formatting. It could be that you want to cut. Whatever that next action is, then you simply would perform that. Now, if you change your mind and don't need this to be selected, in Excel, it is F8 again. And so that is another way for us to do that. In Word, we have to hit our escape for that. So those are some other actions that are helpful. Let's look at another couple other quick shortcuts that will work in Excel, and then we'll move into Word and PowerPoint. So come back to this tropical trips here, and let's just say that I wanted to edit a cell. And to do that, one way is to hit the F2 function key. So that gives us in-place editing. And this can be really helpful if you have lengthy comments or notes in a cell. So the F2 function key. I shared with you before that the Alt equals is a great way for us to do auto sum. And if we wanted to insert a new worksheet into this workbook, Shift F11, Shift F11. So now I have a new sheet. So I'm using Control page down to move back to the sheet. But Shift F11 is another way for us to do that. Now, let's go ahead here and look then at some different ways for us to create some shorthand shortcuts. And let's just say, for instance, that I didn't have an entry here yet. Now, with the autocomplete feature, that is, if I start typing gadgets or a G, then Excel will suggest this to me. But let's say that this is something that I haven't previously typed necessarily. Then I could do a Control D. I mentioned that before. Control D is for duplicate, or Control and the single quote. And so in this case, let's say that I wanted that last name, Control, single quote, or Control D for duplicate. So that is an option for us as well. Now let's say, for instance, I'm going to edit this data, for instance, and I'll say this is the North American sales office location. So I have this lengthy entry, and there's a couple different things. First of all, I might want to apply wrap text, right? But I also, if you want to control where that data breaks, let's look at that. F2 function key. Now I can arrow to it and say that, well, I'd like to have North American on one line. So I'll press Alt and Enter. And maybe I want to break it here as well, Alt, Enter, because usually it's the horizontal space that's so precious to us in Excel. And so now, in this case, I might need to make that row height a little bit taller with that. But the idea is that I can control where the line breaks. We don't want to have headings in our columns in multiple rows. Instead, use that line break, Alt-Enter, to control where you want the line break to be. Let's go back to our go to our blank sheet here for just a moment. And I'm going to go to my view. So if we saw that before, Alt and view is W. And I want to I'll go to Q for zoom, and I'd like to have that be a 200% navigation. So you'll see this a little bit easier. Some keyboard shortcuts to try. If we want to put in the current date, we don't have to type it. We can just press Control and the semicolon and hit Enter. If you want the current time, that's Control colon. So some of you are probably saying, how long has that been available? And why didn't I know about it before today? So these aren't functions. This is content. This isn't going to change. But if you have intake, for instance, paperwork, different things that you want to say, this is when it was accepted, or it was received on this day, those can be really handy for you as well. Now let's say, for instance, we want to format. We saw a lot of different ways for us to do that. And so if I had this data and I want to format in some way, well, I can open up my Format Cells dialog box. Yes, I could go to my Home tab for that too. So Control-1 is a way to open up the Format Cells dialog box, and we can then move to different options for us. That is, do I want to do the number tab? Do I want to align? Whatever that might be, those are different options for us. Also, if you have something selected, if you want the currency format, Control and the $sign. So that's a quick way to do that as well, or Control and the exclamation. That would give you the number format. So some of these might not be things that you do frequently, but if they are, it might be well worth being able to remember them or write those down. So let's look at some other options. I mentioned the idea of the autocomplete, and that's a situation. So for instance, if I'm in a cell and I want to, if I start typing, let's say a letter M for Microsoft, then Excel is going to prompt me. That is, as soon as it has a unique entry, it's going to do that autocomplete to say, is this what you want? And if you do, you simply hit Enter. But we have this challenge where with that, there might be some situations where our content is something that's a lot more challenging here. So let's say, for instance, we have conference rooms, or we have, here I have conference room 100, 200, it could be any others. But if I start typing conference room, by the time I put the specific number in there, I basically typed the whole entry. So how could we make this work better for us? Well, here I'll do Alt and the down arrow key. That gives me my drop-down list. That is my drop-down list. And then I can simply pick the one I want. And think about those long comments, those lengthy notes, and I'll simply hit Enter to accept that. And it doesn't have to be visible. Those autocomplete entries are simply coming from previous content in that column. And so that becomes really handy. Alt and the down arrow key, and now I can use my arrow keys to simply say that this is the one that I want. So those are some other keyboard shortcuts to try in Excel. Let's try a few others, or switch to Word and then move into PowerPoint. So with that then, if you were in your data, so let's say our tropical trips, here I'll highlight And I simply want to create a chart for these selected cells. Now we can go to insert chart. That wouldn't take too long, but instead I could, if you hit the F11 function key, we are actually going to create a chart sheet. A chart sheet is one of two different kinds of chart layouts. And so now we can change the type of chart. This is a column chart, but that becomes one option for us. Now we've got that data selected. This time I want an embedded chart. That is one that's in this worksheet. So for that, what I'm going to do is do Alt and the F1 function key. And there is my chart. So you can tell everyone that just took me hours to build. I mean, I don't have enough time in the day, but all you did was press Alt F1. So those are some other actions that can be really handy for you. Now, whether you're in Excel or other Office programs, there might be situations where you have content that is, you really want to focus on the content and the ribbon is taking up a lot of room. You really like to focus on that vertical content. So in that case, we can collapse the ribbon, and we do that with Control F1. Control F1. So now the ribbon is no longer taking up that vertical space, and you can get back to it. It's a toggle, Control F1 again. And this works in any of the other Microsoft applications as well. Now, if I really want to see a full screen, Control Shift F1, and that might be a little bit more dramatic than some of you want, but it is a toggle to bring it back. So try those out in Excel to see how you can save time and just simply perform these repetitive actions more easily. Let's now go ahead and move to Microsoft Word. What shortcuts are handy there as well? Well, already talked about for navigation in Excel, Control End to go to the end. And that same thing would apply here in Word. Control Home to go to the beginning. And once again, Control G for go to. So Control G or F5 for go to. Now with that then, here it is defaulting to page. So I'll just type in 5 and hit enter. I don't have to click on go to. Enter will do the job for me. Or maybe I want to go to page 8 and I'll hit enter. Now, the one things I want you to just notice is that go to in Microsoft Word also can take us to a lot of other locations like bookmarks and comments and sections. So definitely leverage this shortcut as a way for you to easily navigate in ways that would be helpful for you. So for instance, if I wanted to, I could use my arrow keys in this case. I think this will be a little faster for me if I choose the graphic, and I could simply hit enter and go to next, and next you can see that that's highlighted. Or if I want to go to the previous, Alt S. And so with this now, I'm focusing on what important element within that document I want to navigate to. Let's escape out of here for just a moment. Another navigation keyword shortcut is Shift F5. Shift F5, that is go back. It goes back to the last 3 editing locations. And so this can be a really handy way. Let's say you cut something and then you move to a different location to paste it. Shift F5 takes you back to where you cut it from. So those are some options as well. Now we also have some ways to be able to edit text in a way that's going to be more helpful for us. So let's say, for instance, I want to, when you have lengthy documents especially, so for those of you that do reports and proposals, multiple page documents, there are some really handy tools that will help make things a lot faster for you. And what I want to do is, as well, to make this more visible, is I'm going to enable a feature here called Show Hide. Now I could also do control and the asterisk for that. So you can see when I hover over this, a lot of these options will have keyboard shortcuts or different ways to get to them. So what I want to do, these are to keep the text glued together. As if I want this date to stay together, it's not a good idea to hit enter. The problem is that now we're creating other problems in that as we add text or delete it, this might flow a little differently. And then we have to go and delete what we had just put in, or sometimes an enter key. Well, now we have a new paragraph, and that can have different formatting, vertical formatting. So instead, we're going to glue this text together. I'm going to change my view here so that you can see this a little bit easier. Okay, so with this then, I'll go to my view and zoom into and go to my 200%. I'm using keyword shortcuts for it. You may not need to apply them quite that broadly, but here you'll see that little dot. So I'll delete it. Control Shift Spacebar. Control Shift Spacebar. Let's do it for the next one. Control Shift Spacebar. So that is the glue so that that date stays together or names stay together. Now it looks like a degree symbol, but when we turn off that show hide, remember that was control and the asterisk. It looks just like normal. So you don't worry about creating something that isn't going to work well for you. Let's look at a couple other ways that this could work. We also have a non-breaking hyphen. So that is Control Shift hyphen. I'm deleting the ones that would break the text, let that word wrap work, because I want to glue this together. Once again, it looks a little unusual, but if I then turn off that show hide, you can see it just looks like normal. The only reason I keep that on is I want to be able to see what's going on in that document. And finally, we saw this in Excel, but it works a little differently here in Word. And that is when we want to have a new line, same paragraph. We want to have a line break. And so in this case, I'll move to where I'd like that to go. And we're going to create a new line. I don't want to hit enter because that's a new paragraph. Shift enter. Shift enter. So this is a way that when you have longer titles and headings, and sometimes we can have that with reports and proposals and other types of documents, shift enter. And notice that it does not have that. This is here, this paragraph mark indicates the end of a paragraph. In this case, it's just a new line. So that's another way that this can be handy for us. Let's try a few other handy shortcuts. As we're working in Word, and let's say that we want to control a line break, for instance, I might want to say, well, I'd like to take this section here and put it on a new page. And so with that, a page break is Control Enter, Control Enter. And so that is then another going to new page. Now it's helpful. I like to keep my show hide on basically almost all the time when I'm editing. Some people think it's too cluttered, but it's telling me a lot about that document. So now I have that page break where I can control exactly where my pages break. So don't throw in a bunch of hard returns. Then be more strategic about where you might want that to be. Another option that we have as well is if I have this text selected, is to change the case. So Shift and the F3 function key. So notice as I toggle all lowercase, then we'll say title case, all capitalized, or all uppercase. So Shift F3 is a toggle between those. Control F is find. That will open up our navigation bar. And what I want to look here, for instance, is I'll look for the word candy. And now I have those options. But if I want to do find and replace, Control H, Control H. So with that, that's going to take me up. I escaped out of the find, just so you know. And now I am in find and replace, and I could find a word and actually other characteristics, not just a word. And then I can replace that. If you want to do a spell check, that is your F7 function key. So that becomes another way for us to work with it. So lots of different ways. Now, to get to the search at the top, mentioned that, it kind of varies depending, it's Control E in Outlook and Teams and OneNote, and in Word, it's Alt Q. Now, this is not really our find, it's more to search for actions, sometimes for people. So you probably won't use it as much in Word, but it is another action and option for you. Let's touch on a couple quick formatting actions. And saw this before in Excel. Control B for bold. It's a toggle, so I could turn it off. Control I for underline, italics. Control U for underline. Okay, so that becomes some different options as well. What if I wanted to center this? Control E. Control L for left aligned. Control J for justify. Now, these are things we often control through styles or other ways to be more consistent from one paragraph to another. But know that these are some quick, easy actions, especially if it's a headline or something else that you want to work with. Now, for this, if I wanted to quickly display something single space, that's Control 1. Control 2 is double space. So some other actions that are really helpful for us. And if, for instance, we want to just remove all the paragraph formatting, maybe someone else has messed it up and we want to just start from scratch, Control Q. Control Q is a way to remove the paragraph formatting from the selected text. And this Control Spacebar, I made this bold, Control Spacebar is the way to remove the character formatting from selected text. So those are some other actions that might be a big time saver for you in Microsoft Word. Now let's wrap up with PowerPoint. Keep in mind, many of the things that you've heard or that we've covered might work as well across the other programs, whether it's how we access the search, how we get into our ribbons, working with dialog boxes, and so on. So in this presentation, for instance, if I just hit enter here because now I'm in my normal view where I want to edit this. If I press Control End, I'm at the end of the presentation. Control Home takes me to the beginning. So you're seeing these actions come up multiple times. So those are some different options as well. Additionally, if we wanted to, let's say that I want to copy a slide. I have a slide layout and I want to duplicate this. Well, remember our Control D in Excel? In PowerPoint, Control D gives us a duplicate of our slide. And for some reason, there we go. Some didn't think I was there for now. So Control D to duplicate. That's easier than doing a copy and paste. You're just duplicating it and then you will change the content. So I'll delete that one for right now, but know that that's another option for us. And let's say that we also, a couple other quick things with shapes, and then we're going to look at some presentation options. So press Control N for new. That gives me a new PowerPoint presentation. And with that one, if I want to create a shape, for instance, now I will, for that shape, I will just go to Insert. But we know that we have other options for that. And I'm going to put in a shape. Say that I create a square. Now, I wouldn't do this in a title slide, but for the sake of time, we'll just keep it like that. Now I've created this, and what if I wanted to duplicate it? Well, I could do, we could do that Control D. Remember, it worked in the slide, but it also works with the shape. So that becomes another option for us. Let's look at something with shapes again. I want a perfect circle. Well, this is an oval, this isn't a circle, but I want to constrain it. So we hold Shift, and then as we drag, we're constraining. That is, we're making it equally proportional. I'm holding Shift this whole time. So this would apply for our rectangles, for triangles, for stars, and others as well. Let go of my mouse, and there I have my shape. Now, another keyboard shortcut with that is that if let's say we saw how we could copy a shape. If I want to copy and align at the same time, I'll hold down my, so if I just hold down the Control and drag, I get a copy. Control D was another option. But this time I'll select this circle, Control Shift, and drag. Now notice it's constrained to that horizontal plane, or it could be to the vertical plane. But because I'm holding down the Shift, I'm keeping that more even. And it's just, say there are other alignment tools, but this can be a lot faster and easy way for us to do that. So those are some of the handy keyboard shortcuts as you're working with a presentation, but let's look at delivering a presentation. What are some shortcuts that would be helpful for you? The F5 function key, as you can see right here, is a great way for us to run a slideshow from the beginning. But if you're not, let's say you want to see how a particular animation or a layout looks in a slide and you're just in the middle of your presentation, press Shift F5 and that will run the slideshow from the current slide. So that can be a really handy way for you to work with it. Now, for help during your presentation, or if you want to see other keyboard shortcuts, hit the F1 function key. Now know that your audience will see this. That's okay. So it's good to know that they will see that when it's displayed, but it might be well worth it instead of escaping out of your presentation. Now I will just hit OK, and that will take this or clear that screen. But that is one way to get a list of keyboard shortcuts. Now here's one of my favorites, and that is, if you know the slide number, you can enter it and jump to it right away. So instead of having to click through and skip a bunch of slides because you're running out of time, create a handout or even list a quick cheat sheet of those slide numbers. So we don't have to know them, but this is what I do with every presentation. I want to know what that number is so I can quickly move to it. So in this case, I want to go to the last slide. And I'll type in a 12 and hit enter. Actually, that's not the very last. The last one's 13, but that's okay. So I'm on this slide. And now I want to go back to where I was before. That's slide 3. I type a 3, hit enter. And so the idea with this is that you can, instead of distracting your audience by clicking through a lot of slides that you don't have time to share, or you changed your mind and you decide you don't want to show them, then in this case, you don't have to escape out of the presentation. You can simply type in the slide number and that will navigate for you. That will take you there. Now, if you don't know what the slide number is, don't worry. Simply press Control S. Control S. Now that will bring up the slide selector. So that is a way for you to say, oh, what slide do I want to go to? Well, maybe I want to go here to slide 11. Well, I select it, I just arrow to it, and I hit enter, and there I am. Now I'll type in 4 and hit enter, and I go back again. So that becomes another option for us. Now, it's good to keep in mind that your audience will see this, but you can use that. Control S works different, is save when you're not in the presentation, and it's a slide selector when you're here. But here's even more, even better option, I think. because it's more visual, and that is to see all the slides, press the letter G, think of go to. So yes, your audience will see that, but this is going to be a lot slicker than the clunkiness of escaping back to your presentation and trying to find it that way. And then once you find the one you want to move to, you can arrow click on it either way, then you can move right to it. So this helps you to improve your professionalism as a presenter in PowerPoint. If I want to go to the first slide, I can hit the home key, go to the last slide, end key, or as we saw before, I could type in the slide number. Now, what are your options when your conversations or your presentations move away from the current slide? So whether it's an in-person or a virtual, you can temporarily change the screen to black or white. Now, in Zoom, when I type a B to change to black, no problem, okay. Sometimes it doesn't seem to work. So I just want you to know that that is a possibility. Now, the white can help make it seem like you made a mistake or that there's a presentation issue. So that might be something just to keep in mind. But this can be a great way to kind of just take away from the focus of people staring on the screen at something that isn't relevant to the current conversation, rather than just having them look at something that is a distraction there. So that's another option for us. Let's look at a couple other presentation shortcuts and then we will wrap up. And so with this, let's say that I want to make a notation on the screen. Well, Control P for pen. That is changing my mouse. So it is a pen. You can see I'm very artistic here. Now, I could also right click if I wanted to change my pen options and colors. So that's something for you to explore on your own. But let's say that I want to erase something. Control E for erase. And now my mouse becomes an eraser. If I had multiple annotations, I could type a letter E for erase all. So that would be another option for me. Now, anytime I want to go away from the pen, I can do a Control A for arrow. Let's look at the next one. Control I for highlighter. And now I can highlight directly on that slide if I want to. And the same erase options would work here as well. What about a laser? Well, if it's a virtual presentation, Control L. So now my mouse becomes a laser. So in person, we could have a remote control that would do that laser for us. But in either case, make sure you slow down. Otherwise, this can be more of a distraction than a helpful way to annotate. So Control L for laser. And anytime that mouse just gets in the way or can be a little distraction, Control H hides the mouse. Control A or Control U will bring it back. So those are some other options as well. To display subtitles, to make, especially we may have language or accessibility issues, this can be really helpful. And sometimes there can just be audio challenges too. So if I'm in the middle of a presentation, I'm going to type on J and that will turn on my subtitles. Okay. So with that though, it's keep in mind that programs like Zoom and Teams also have their own live captioning feature. So this is not something that you need to do in PowerPoint, but it is an option for you. So I'll type another J to turn that off. And a few other quick tricks, and we will wrap up on our keyboard shortcuts for PowerPoint. If I want to zoom in, I can hit the plus and keep hitting plus and zoom in. Now I can use my mouse then to reposition what I want to focus. To move out, that's my minus. And if I hit it multiple times, now I get to that slide navigation, which we saw earlier. So that becomes another way to work. And then finally, escape to end the slideshow. If I have those annotations, do I want to keep them? No. I know they were gorgeous, but we're not going to do that. So that is our look at time-saving keyboard shortcuts in Microsoft Office. So take a moment on your own to review your notes to see what shortcuts you'll start using. I want to also remind you that this is a monthly webinar training series. And not only is it absolutely free to really build your professional development, but we also have these recordings available in the K-Score Technologies YouTube channel. Our upcoming sessions in the next couple months are Microsoft Teams. First, leveraging the power of Teams is going to be an overview of shortcuts, customization for Teams, and then we'll focus more on the time-saving applications that are available to you. So look for those announcements, and we hope to see you join us for that. Also, when this session finishes up, you'll see a survey pop up, and this is a great way to give us feedback about what other topics would be helpful for us as we plan our training schedules. As always, it's a pleasure to be able to help you to more productively use your applications. So today we looked at keyboard shortcuts in Microsoft Office, but there's a lot more. How can we help you to be more productive? So please reach out to us for IT services and consulting to really support you with the Microsoft technologies. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next month.